The breast cancer diagnosis report had been sitting on my coffee table for 4 days, its manila folder edges curling slightly in the humidity of our Florida home, and not once did my mother-in-law Gloria mention it, despite the fact she'd been sleeping in our guest room that entire time, rearranging my kitchen cabinets and criticizing everything from how I folded my husband's shirts to the excessive number of houseplants I kept. 4 days of her reaching across that very table for her reading glasses, her cup of tea, her knitting needles, and not one word about the medical report with stage 2 carcinoma, stamped across the top in angry red letters. I suppose when you're busy judging someone's life, you don't have time to notice it's falling apart. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, Gloria hadn't missed a single opportunity to comment on my weight, my cooking, my career choices, scrutinizing every aspect of my existence with the precision of a prosecuting attorney. Yet somehow, the most important document of my life had become invisible to her eagle eyes. It wasn't until the 5th day, when I missed preparing her favorite breakfast because I was doubled over in the bathroom from my first round of medications, that all hell broke loose. "Rebecca!" The shrill voice echoed through our 2-story craftsman home, bouncing off the walnut floors I'd spent years saving for. "Where's breakfast? Michael has that presentation at the firm today. He needs his protein." I could hear her slippers, shuffling across the kitchen floor, opening and closing cabinets with increasing agitation. My husband Michael had already left, slipping out before dawn for an early meeting, pressing a gentle kiss to my forehead and whispering, "You'll be okay," before disappearing. Easy for him to say? He was escaping to the sanctuary of his law office. I was trapped in what had become enemy territory. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to compose myself. The woman in the mirror looked back at me with hollow eyes, her complexion ashen, dark circles betraying the nights spent crying silently into her pillow. At 42, I wasn't prepared for cancer. Then again, who is? The diagnosis had come like a thunderclap from a clear blue sky 3 weeks earlier, turning my orderly world upside down. The only thing worse than facing cancer was facing cancer, with Gloria Winters micromanaging my deterioration. When Michael had suggested his mother stay with us, just until we figure things out, I'd reluctantly agreed. What choice did I have? I was the one who'd always handled everything. Our home, our social calendar, my job as an architectural consultant, his dry cleaning, his mother's frequent visits. The idea that roles would reverse, that others would step up to care for me, had seemed logical in my moment of vulnerability. How naive I'd been. "Rebecca, are you hiding in there?" Gloria's knuckles rapped sharply against the bathroom door. "Michael called me. He forgot his presentation notes. He needs you to bring them to the office immediately." I gripped the edge of the sink, steadying myself against another wave of nausea. "I can't today, Gloria," I managed, my voice barely audible. The doorknob jiggled impatiently. "What do you mean you can't? It's just a short drive downtown. Don't be dramatic." I swung the door open, facing my mother-in-law's immaculately made-up face. At 72, Gloria maintained the precise appearance that had served her well as the wife of a prominent judge, not a silver hair out of place, tailored slacks pressed to military sharpness, and a perpetually disapproving expression that had intimidated courtroom stenographers and family members alike for half a century. "I started treatment yesterday," I said flatly. "The medication makes me sick. I'm not supposed to drive." Gloria's eyes narrowed, assessing me like she might a witness giving suspicious testimony. Treatment for what? Something inside me, something that had been bending and accommodating for nearly 20 years of marriage, suddenly snapped clean in two. "For the cancer, Gloria. The cancer diagnosis that's been sitting on our coffee table since Monday. The one you've been setting your crossword puzzles on top of all week." Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. For once in her life, Gloria Winters was speechless, but only momentarily. "Well," she recovered, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her blouse. "No one told me specifically. You can't expect me to pry into private papers left around the house. That would be inappropriate." I stared at her, incredulous. "Inappropriate? You reorganized my underwear drawer yesterday because you said my system lacked logic. You've read my mail since the day Michael and I got engaged." "That's different." She sniffed. "That was for your own good. Now about Michael's presentation notes." "No." The word hung between us, small but substantial. "Excuse me?" I said no. "I'm not driving downtown. I'm not bringing Michael his notes. I'm going back to bed, and I'll be turning off my phone." Something flickered across Gloria's face. Confusion? Perhaps. Or the first inkling that the natural order of her world was being disrupted. "This isn't like you, Rebecca. Michael depends on you." "And I depend on him," I replied quietly. "But he's not here, is he? He's at work, and you're in my bathroom, and neither of you noticed I had cancer until I couldn't make breakfast." I moved past her, headed toward our bedroom, my safe haven with its soft blue walls and the reading nook overlooking our Japanese maple tree. Gloria followed, heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood. "Well, I'm certainly not equipped to handle a crisis like this," she declared. "I'm not a nurse. We'll need to make arrangements. Perhaps your sister can come stay instead. Clearly, this situation requires someone with medical knowledge." My sister Jenna lived in Seattle with her wife and their twins. She was a kindergarten teacher, not a doctor, but Gloria had never bothered learning the details of my family's lives. They existed solely as occasional characters in the grand drama of the Winters family legacy. "My sister isn't coming," I said, sinking onto the edge of the bed. "No one is coming to rescue any of us. I have cancer, I feel awful, and I'm going to rest. You'll need to figure out your own breakfast, and Michael will need to figure out his own presentation notes." Gloria stood in the doorway, clutching her pearls, literally clutching the strand around her neck as if it might anchor her in these suddenly turbulent waters. "You're being very selfish right now, Rebecca. This isn't just about you. Think about how Michael must feel, how worried he must be. So worried he'd left before dawn without waking me. So worried he'd forgotten to tell his mother, the woman, now living in our home, about my diagnosis. So worried he'd called asking for presentation notes instead of checking how I'd tolerated my first treatment." I reached for my phone and turned it off, silencing the notifications already piling up. Michael, my office, probably the school where I volunteered on Wednesdays. For 20 years, I'd been responsibly, reliably present for everyone in my life. Today, I chose to disappear. I'm going. "To sleep now?" I told Gloria, pulling the duvet over my shoulders and turning my back to her. "Please close the door on your way out." "This is most irregular," she muttered. But I heard the door click shut. Sleep came in restless waves, punctuated by the distant sounds of Gloria on the phone, probably calling the cavalry. I caught snippets. Completely unreasonable, and leaving us in the lurch, and never seen her behave this way. I pulled the pillow over my head and drifted back into merciful unconsciousness. When I awoke, the afternoon sun was slanting through the blinds, painting golden stripes across the bedspread. The house was quiet, unusually so. I reached instinctively for my phone before remembering I'd turned it off. The digital clock on my nightstand read 3:17. Michael would be finishing his presentation about now. Gloria would typically be watching her afternoon soap operas, and I would normally be starting dinner preparations. Instead, I lay still, listening to the unfamiliar sound of absolutely nothing being demanded of me. The nausea had receded to a dull queasiness, manageable if I moved slowly. I sat up, testing my equilibrium, then made my way to the bathroom. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The face in the mirror looked marginally better. Still pale, but the wild look of morning sickness had faded. I brushed my teeth and splashed water on my face, considering my next move. Curiosity finally drove me downstairs. The living room was empty, the kitchen spotless. On the counter sat a note in Gloria's precise handwriting. Rebecca, since you are indisposed, I've gone to Michael's office to deliver his materials and then to Cynthia's for the afternoon. I'll return for dinner. Please ensure something appropriate is prepared, as Michael will need proper nutrition during this difficult time. Gloria P.S. I've taken the liberty of calling Dr. Reynolds for a second opinion on your condition. He was your father-in-law's physician and is much more experienced than these young doctors you insist on seeing. He'll be expecting your call. The familiar rage bubbled up, the special blend of fury and helplessness that only Gloria could inspire. Dr. Reynolds had been retired for a decade, was notorious for dismissing women's health concerns, and had absolutely no oncological expertise. But in Gloria's world, connections trumped qualifications every time. I crumpled the note and tossed it into the recycling bin. Then, in an act of quiet rebellion, I made myself a cup of peppermint tea and carried it out to the backyard garden. My sanctuary, the one place Gloria rarely ventured because of her sensitive skin and aversion to insects. The garden had been my project for years, a lush oasis of native plants, flowering shrubs, and the vegetable beds that provided our summer produce. Michael called it my expensive hobby. Gloria referred to it as my dirty little pastime, but to me it was the only space that truly reflected who I was. Patient, nurturing, capable of creating beauty from nothing but time and care. I settled into the weathered Adirondack chair beneath the pergola, watching bees drift lazily between the coneflowers and black-eyed Susans. In this moment of stillness, away from the suffocating pressure of Gloria's expectations and Michael's dependence, a terrible clarity began to dawn on me. I had spent the last 20 years of my life accommodating, adjusting, making room for everyone else's needs while my own shrank smaller and smaller. I had become so good at anticipating others' desires that they no longer needed to see me at all. I was simply the mechanism by which their lives ran smoothly. The cook, the cleaner, the scheduler, the emotional support system. And now, faced with the greatest challenge of my life, I was still expected to prioritize Michael's presentation, Gloria's comfort, even my dead father-in-law's retired doctor's opinion. I sipped my tea, watching a monarch butterfly land delicately on a milkweed plant. I had planted that milkweed specifically for the monarchs 3 summers ago, nurturing it through drought and early frost, waiting patiently for this exact moment, the perfect symbiosis of creature and habitat. What had I nurtured in my marriage? What perfect symbiosis had I created there? The sound of tires on gravel announced Michael's return, earlier than expected. I remained seated, making no move to go inside. A few moments later, the back door slid open, and my husband stepped onto the patio. Michael Winters had the kind of conventional good looks that improved with age, salt and pepper hair that had once been chestnut brown, laugh lines that softened his serious expression, the trim physique of a man who prioritized his health club membership. At 45, he looked exactly like what he was, a successful attorney from a good family who had never wanted for anything in his life. "Hey," he said, approaching cautiously. "Mom said you weren't feeling well." "That's one way to put it," I replied, keeping my eyes on the garden. He sat in the chair beside me, loosening his tie. The presentation went well. Johnson was impressed enough to move up the partnership vote. Could be good news by the end of the month. I nodded, unsurprised that this was his opening line. Michael's partnership track had dominated our conversations. For years. "Mom mentioned you were upset about something," he continued. Something about your doctor's appointment? I finally turned to look at him. Michael, the oncologist, started me on treatment yesterday. For the breast cancer. The cancer your mother has been pretending not to notice all week while sleeping 20 feet away from the diagnosis report. His face fell. Beck, I thought we agreed to wait. No, I interrupted. You suggested waiting. My doctor and I decided it was better to start treatment immediately. I told you this on Sunday night. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it almost made my heart ache. Almost. I've been swamped with this presentation. You know how important it is. More important than your wife having cancer? The words hung between us. Michael had the decency to look ashamed, at least. Of course not. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like both you and your mother have been going to extraordinary lengths to ignore what's happening to me. That's not fair, Beck. Mom's been here helping. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. Helping who? She's been rearranging my kitchen, criticizing my housekeeping, and making more work for me at every turn. This morning she demanded I drive downtown to bring you notes you forgot, even after I told her I was sick from treatment. Michael frowned. She didn't know about the treatment. Because neither of you bothered to read the report that's been sitting in plain sight all week. Because neither of you have actually asked me how I'm doing or what I need. Because as long as I keep functioning like a well-oiled machine, neither of you have to face the fact that I'm human and I'm sick and I'm scared. My voice broke on the last word, tears filling my eyes despite my determination to remain composed. Michael reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Beck, come on. You know I care. I've just been distracted with work. And your mother? What's her excuse? Michael sighed. You know how she is. She processes things in her own way. Her way seems to be pretending nothing is wrong while making everything worse, I said flatly. She called your father's ancient, sexist doctor for a second opinion on my cancer without even asking me. She means well. Those 3 words, she means well, had been Michael's reflexive defense of his mother for our entire relationship. Gloria could say something cruel about my appearance, criticize my career choices, undermine my decisions in my own home, and the response was always the same. She means well. As if intention negated impact. As if I should be endlessly, infinitely, understanding of a woman who had never once tried to understand me. I can't do this, I said quietly. Can't do what? Any of it. Cancer treatment? Your mother? Your partnership track? This whole exhausting performance of being the perfect wife while everyone ignores what I actually need. Michael looked genuinely alarmed now. You're upset. The medication is making you emotional. Let's talk about this when you're feeling better. When would that be, Michael? After chemo destroys my immune system? After radiation burns my skin? After surgery removes parts of my body? When exactly should we schedule this conversation for? He had no answer. Of course he didn't. Michael Winters, brilliant attorney, masterful, in the courtroom, was completely at a loss when faced with raw emotion that couldn't be neatly filed away for later consideration. The back door slid open again, and Gloria appeared, carrying a tray with a teapot and cups. She'd evidently returned from her friend Cynthia's house while we were talking. I thought some chamomile might settle Rebecca's stomach, she announced, as if she'd been concerned about my welfare all along. Michael, darling, how was the presentation? Did you use the opening argument we practiced? And just like that, I became invisible again. Michael turned toward his mother, immediately launching into a detailed recap of his professional triumph, while Gloria set down the tea service and settled into a chair, focused entirely on her son. I stood up silently and walked back into the house, through the kitchen, up the stairs, and into our bedroom. Neither of them called after me or seemed to notice I'd gone. I could hear their voices drifting up from the garden, the familiar rhythm of their exclusive conversation, the occasional burst of laughter. Standing in the middle of our bedroom, the room I had decorated, the bed I made each morning, the space I had created for us to share our lives, I suddenly felt like a stranger. How had I lived here for 15 years without realizing I had never truly been at home? I opened my closet and pulled out the vintage Samsonite suitcase my grandmother had given me for my college graduation. It was purple, a color Gloria had once described as attention-seeking, with brass fixtures and a silk interior lining. I'd used it for our honeymoon and then relegated it to the back of the closet as more practical luggage took its place. Now I ran my fingers over its textured surface, feeling an unexpected rush of affection for this relic of my pre-Michael life. With sudden decisiveness, I placed it on the bed and began to pack. Not everything. Just enough for a few weeks. Comfortable clothes, my medications, the dog-eared journal I'd neglected for years, the worn paperback copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God that had been my mother's favorite. I added my laptop, phone charger, and the framed photo of my parents on their last anniversary before the car accident that took them both. I didn't rush. There was no need. Michael and Gloria would talk in the garden until dinner, then expect me to materialize with a meal. I had time to consider each item, to move with intention rather than impulse. When the suitcase was packed, I sat at the small writing desk by the window and took out a sheet of my personal stationery, cream-colored, paper with a simple embossed R at the top, a birthday gift from Jenna years ago. I uncapped my favorite pen and began to write. Michael, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. The words flowed easily, years of unspoken truths finally finding their way onto the page. I wrote about the cancer, about feeling invisible, about the slow erosion of my sense of self. I wrote about Gloria's constant criticism and his constant acquiescence. I wrote about needing space to heal, not just from cancer, but from the patterns we had established that were slowly killing something essential inside me. I didn't write about whether I was coming back. I didn't know the answer to that question. Yet when I finished, I sealed the letter in an envelope, propped it against his pillow, and took one last look around the room. Then I carried my purple suitcase down the back stairs that led directly to the garage, placed it in the trunk of my car, and drove away from the house where my mother-in-law had invaded the most vulnerable time of my life, and where my husband had led her. As I turned onto the main road, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Mom's asking what's for dinner. Any requests? I didn't reply. Instead, I set the navigation for a destination I hadn't visited in years, Serenity Shores, the small coastal town where my parents had once owned a vacation cottage. The place where, long ago, I had known exactly who I was before I became Mrs. Michael Winters. It was time to remember that woman again. The coastal highway stretched before me like a ribbon of possibility, its curves hugging the shoreline as I drove south. 3 hours had passed since I'd left my perfectly curated life behind, and with each mile marker, the vice grip of anxiety around my chest loosened incrementally. The sun was beginning to set, painting the ocean beside me in shades of amber and gold. I'd forgotten how beautiful this drive could be. Or perhaps I'd never really noticed, always too busy navigating vacation schedules, checking if Michael had packed his preferred toiletries, making sure Gloria had her special pillow for the guest room. My phone had erupted with notifications. For the first hour, texts, calls, voicemails, until I finally silenced it and tossed it onto the passenger seat. Whatever crisis my absence had created would have to unfold without my management. The thought was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. Serenity Shores appeared on the horizon just as twilight settled over the coastline. The small beach town had changed in the 15 years since I'd last visited. New buildings dotted the main street, fancy coffee shops had replaced some of the old diners, and a sprawling resort now dominated the north end of the beach. But the essential character remained: weathered boardwalks, salt-worn cottages with colorful shutters, fishing boats bobbing in the protected harbor. My parents' cottage had been sold after their death, the proceeds split between my sister and me. I'd used my half for the down payment on the house with Michael, a decision that had seemed practical at the time. Now I wondered what might have happened if I'd kept my stake in this little piece of paradise instead. With no specific destination, I pulled into the parking lot of the Driftwood Inn, a modest 2-story motel painted a cheerful aquamarine. A neon vacancy sign buzzed in the window of the office. It wasn't the Ritz, but it was clean, affordable, and, most importantly, not within Gloria's sphere of influence. "Just you?" asked the woman at the front desk, a sun-weathered blonde in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "Just me?" I confirmed, the words feeling strangely significant. "How long will you be staying?" I hesitated, considering the question. How long did it take to rebuild a life? How many nights would it take to remember who I had been before I became an extension of the Winters family machine? "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Can I start with a week?" The woman, Marge, according to her name tag, studied me briefly, her gaze lingering on the pallor of my skin, the slight tremor in my hands as I presented my credit card. There was no judgment in her expression, just quiet assessment. "Room 12 has the best view," she said, sliding a key across the counter. "And it's at the end of the building, so it's quieter. Kitchen's basic but functional. Laundry rooms, downstairs by the ice machine. Anything else you need, just holler." I thanked her and turned to leave, but she called after me. "Honey, if you're running from something, that's your business. But if you need a doctor while you're here, my son-in-law's the best on the coast. Just say the word." Unexpected tears pricked at my eyes. How had this stranger seen in 30 seconds what my husband and mother-in-law had missed for days? "Thank you," I managed. "I might take you up on that." Room 12 was exactly as advertised, modest but comfortable, with a small kitchenette, a queen bed covered in a blue and white patchwork quilt, and sliding glass doors that opened onto a narrow balcony overlooking the ocean. I wheeled my purple suitcase inside, placed my medication on the nightstand, and stepped out onto the balcony. The rhythmic crash of waves against the shore filled the darkness, a sound so primordial and constant it seemed to resonate in my bones. I closed my eyes and breathed in the salt air, letting it fill my lungs and clear my head. For the first time in months, perhaps years, I felt a moment of perfect stillness. No demands, no expectations, no performance of wifely duties or daughterly obligations. Just Rebecca, standing alone at the edge of the continent, facing the vastness of the ocean and her uncertain future. My solitude was interrupted by the insistent growl of my stomach. I hadn't eaten since breakfast, and even the nausea from my medication couldn't override the basic human need for sustenance. I changed into jeans and a simple cotton sweater, then walked down to the strip of restaurants along the marina. Captain Pete's Crab Shack glowed with warm light and the promise of comfort food. Inside, the walls were decorated with fishing nets, buoys, and framed black and white photographs of weathered fishermen with their catches. A chalkboard listed the day's specials, all featuring whatever had been pulled from the sea that morning. "Table for one?" asked a server with a wave of chestnut hair and a warm smile. "Yes, please." The phrase no longer felt pathetic or lonely, but like a declaration of independence. She led me to a small table by the window, where I could watch the moonlight dancing on the harbor water. I ordered clam chowder and a glass of white wine, then pulled out my phone for the first time in hours. 17 missed calls, 32 text messages, 5 voicemails. My thumb hovered over the notification screen, anxiety immediately flooding back. Then, with a decisive swipe, I cleared them all. Whatever emergencies they contained could wait until morning. Instead, I opened my email and composed a brief message to my oncologist, Dr. Savannah Chen. "Dr. Chen, I've had to leave town unexpectedly. I'm continuing my medication as prescribed, but will need to transfer my treatment plan to a local doctor temporarily. I'm staying in Serenity Shores. Could you recommend someone in this area or advise me on next steps? Thank you, Rebecca Winters. I hit send just as my wine arrived. The server, Katie, according to her name tag, placed it before me with an encouraging smile. First time in Serenity Shores? She asked. Not exactly. I used to come here as a kid, but it's been years. Well, welcome back. She gestured toward the window. Best view in town right here. Some folks pay thousands for those fancy resort rooms up the beach, but they don't get half the charm. I smiled, grateful for the easy conversation with someone who wanted nothing from me except perhaps a decent tip. It's beautiful. I'd forgotten how much I love it here. You picking up any shifts while you're in town? She asked, nodding toward my hands. I looked down, confused. Shifts? Sorry, professional nosy body here. Your hands, the way you handled the menu, checked the glassware. Restaurant industry, right? I laughed, surprised. Not for 20 years. I worked at Russo's Italian in college to pay tuition. Knew it, she grinned triumphantly. You never lose those reflexes. Well, if you're sticking around and need extra cash, Pete's always looking for experienced servers during tourist season. The suggestion was so unexpected, so far removed from my carefully constructed professional identity, that I didn't know how to respond. Rebecca Winters, architectural consultant with a master's degree and a portfolio of high-end commercial projects, slinging seafood platters for tips. Yet something about the idea was strangely appealing. Simple. Straightforward. A job with clear boundaries and immediate results, where I wouldn't have to navigate office politics or client egos. Where my performance wouldn't be measured by how well I anticipated others' needs before they expressed them. I'll keep that in mind, I said, surprising myself. Katie left me to enjoy my meal, which arrived steaming and fragrant with herbs and butter. I ate slowly, savoring each spoonful of the rich chowder, allowing myself to focus completely on the sensory experience, something I realized I rarely did anymore. At home, meals had become functional affairs, designed around Michael's preferences and Gloria's dietary restrictions, consumed while discussing schedules or listening to Gloria reminisce about Judge Winter's illustrious career. When was the last time I had truly tasted my food? When had eating become just another task to complete, rather than a pleasure to enjoy? After dinner, I walked along the deserted boardwalk, watching the stars emerge in the velvet darkness above the ocean. The medication fatigue was settling into my limbs, but I resisted returning to my room just yet. The night air felt like a balm, and the solitude was too precious to surrender. I found a bench facing the water and sat down, pulling my sweater tighter against the ocean breeze. From my pocket, I withdrew the small notebook I'd grabbed at the last minute, a gift from a colleague that I'd never used, its pages pristine and waiting. With the pen I'd borrowed from the restaurant, I began to write, not a letter this time, but a list. Things I want. The pen hovered over the page for a long moment. What did I want? The question was so foreign, so rarely considered, that my mind went blank. For decades, my wants had been subordinated to others' needs. First my parents after their accident, left my father partially paralyzed, then Michael's rising career, then Gloria's constant demands for attention and accommodation. Slowly, hesitantly, I began to write. To survive cancer. 2. Peace and quiet. 3. No one rearranging my kitchen. 4. Time to read without interruption. 5. To paint again. The last item surprised me. I hadn't held a paintbrush since art school, abandoning that passion when Michael's law school demands and my practical job in architectural consulting took precedence. Gloria had once called my paintings quaint little hobby projects, and somehow that casual dismissal had been enough to make me pack away my supplies for good. I added more items, my pen moving faster now. To sleep late sometimes, 7. To eat. Meals I enjoy, not what's appropriate for others. 8. Conversations where I'm not interrupted. A doctor who takes me seriously. 10. To matter, I stopped at number 10, staring at those two stark words. To matter. Not as an accessory, not as a support system, not as the invisible infrastructure holding everyone else's lives together. To matter for myself, as myself. A tear splashed onto the page, blurring the ink. Then another. Then a flood, releasing all. The grief and rage and fear I'd been containing since the diagnosis. Since the wedding. Since I'd slowly erased myself to fit into the spaces others allowed me. I don't know how long I sat there, sobbing quietly on a bench in a strange town. Eventually, the emotional storm passed, leaving me emptied but somehow lighter. I wiped my face with my sleeve, tucked the notebook back into my pocket, and made my way back to the Driftwood Inn on shaky legs. My room welcomed me with its simple comforts. I took my evening medication, washed my face, and collapsed onto the bed, too exhausted to even change into pajamas. Sleep claimed me immediately, deep and dreamless. The persistent chime of my phone woke me the next morning. Sunlight streamed through the sliding glass doors I'd forgotten to close, and the sound of seagulls drifted in with the breeze. For a moment, I was disoriented, unsure where I was or why I wasn't in my bedroom with its carefully selected faro and ball paint and custom window treatments. Then it all came rushing back. The diagnosis, Gloria's invasion, my escape. The phone continued its insistent chirping. With reluctance, I reached for it, expecting Michael's name on the screen. Instead, I saw Dr. Chen's office number. Hello? Rebecca? It's Dr. Chen. I got your email. Are you all right? Her voice, practical and warm, brought unexpected comfort. I'd chosen Dr. Chen specifically for her straightforward manner and refusal to sugarcoat. She was younger than most oncologists I'd interviewed, but her credentials were impeccable, and she'd taken my concerns seriously from our first consultation. I'm okay, I said, sitting up slowly to minimize the dizziness. I just needed space. Space from treatment? No, not at all. I'm following the protocol exactly. Space from everything else. There was a brief pause, then Dr. Chen spoke with her characteristic directness. Family situation? You could say that. I see. Another pause. Rebecca, I understand needing space, but cancer treatment isn't something you should navigate alone, especially with the particular regimen we've started you on. You need support. No, I acknowledged. But right now, my support system was causing more stress than the cancer itself. Dr. Chen made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Fair enough. About your request for a local oncologist. I have a colleague. In Serenity Shores, Dr. Eliza Okafor. She's excellent. Trained at Johns Hopkins. Specializes in breast cancer. I can have your records transferred this morning if you'd like. Relief washed through me. Yes, please. Thank you. I'll text you her contact information. And Rebecca? Whatever's happening with your family, remember that stress management is part of your treatment too. Do what you need to do to keep your environment conducive to healing. After ending the call, I lay back on the pillows, considering Dr. Chen's words. Stress. Management. I'd spent years managing everyone else's stress, absorbing their anxieties, smoothing their paths. Who had been managing mine? My phone buzzed with Dr. Chen's text containing Dr. Okafor's information. I immediately called the new oncologist's office and was surprised to be offered an appointment that same afternoon. We had a cancellation, explained the receptionist. Dr. Okafor always prioritizes new patients transferring from active treatment. With several hours to kill before my appointment, I decided to explore Serenity Shores properly. I showered, dressed in comfortable clothes, and made my way down to the motel office. Marge was at the desk again, reading a paperback crime novel. Morning. Honey, she greeted me. Sleep well? Better than I have in weeks, I admitted. Ocean air'll do that. She closed her book. Looking for recommendations? Breakfast? Sightseeing? Shopping? Actually, I began, then hesitated. Your son-in-law, the doctor. I was wondering if he might be Dr. Okafor. Marge's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Eliza? Lord, no. Eliza's my niece's husband's sister. But she is the best oncologist on the eastern seaboard. My son-in-law's just a regular GP. She studied me with new understanding. So that's what you're running from? It wasn't a question, and I didn't treat it as one. Instead, I asked, is there a place nearby where I could buy some clothes? I packed, in a hurry. Main Street's got a few boutiques, but they're tourist-priced. For basics, try Coastal Supplies at the end of Harbor Road. They've got everything from sundresses to fishing waders, all reasonably priced. I thanked her and set out, enjoying the simple pleasure of wandering without agenda. Main Street was beginning to buzz with morning activity, coffee shops filling with locals, shopkeepers setting out displays, early bird tourists consulting, maps and guidebooks. I found Coastal Supplies exactly where Marge had indicated, a sprawling general store with wooden floors that creaked pleasantly underfoot. Inside was an eclectic mix of practical clothing, beach gear, groceries, and hardware. I selected a few simple outfits: cotton pants, t-shirts, a light sweater for evening, a sundress that caught my eye with its cheerful pattern of yellow flowers. At the register, the elderly man who rang up my purchases chatted amiably about the weather forecast and the expected influx of tourists for the upcoming weekend fishing tournament. He didn't ask why I was in town or who I was meeting, didn't need my shopping choices to conform to anyone else's expectations. The transaction was refreshingly simple. With my purchases in hand, I continued exploring, eventually finding a small cafe called The Bookmark that combined a bookstore with a coffee shop. It was exactly the kind of place I'd always wanted to linger in but rarely had time for. The walls were lined with bookshelves, each table accompanied by a comfortable armchair rather than standard cafe seating, and the aroma of freshly ground coffee mingled with the distinctive scent of paper and binding glue. I ordered a peppermint tea, coffee being temporarily off limits according to my treatment plan, and browsed the shelves, eventually selecting a novel I'd been meaning to read for years. Then I settled into an armchair by the window and simply read. No interruptions, no checking the time to ensure I'd be home before Michael, no mentally composing grocery lists or worrying about Gloria's opinions on my frivolous use of time. Just me, a book, and the luxury of unstructured hours. The cafe grew busier as lunchtime approached. At the table next to mine, two women in their 60s settled with their salads and iced teas, their conversation flowing with the ease of lifelong friendship. So then Marjorie says to me, "Well, if Harold doesn't like how I'm spending my own inheritance, he can take it up with my lawyer." The speaker, a silver-haired woman with dramatic turquoise glasses, gestured expressively. I nearly died. After 40 years of letting that man control every penny, she's finally standing up for herself. Her companion, petite, with a stylish pixie cut, nodded approvingly. Good for her. Barbara did the same thing when she started her treatment. Said cancer was her wake-up call, life's too short to keep living for other people's approval. I found myself unconsciously leaning toward their conversation, their words resonating with my own situation in a way that felt almost cosmic. The woman with the turquoise glasses noticed my attention and smiled warmly. "Sorry if we're disturbing your reading, honey. We get carried away sometimes." "Not at all," I assured her. I couldn't help overhearing about your friend's cancer. I hesitated, then decided on honesty with these strangers I'd never see again. I was diagnosed recently myself. Breast cancer. Their expressions shifted immediately to concern. The silver-haired woman reached over and patted my hand. "Oh, sweetheart. I'm Diana and this is Patty. Are you here alone?" I nodded. "First time?" asked Patty. When I looked confused, she clarified. First cancer rodeo. Barbara's on her second round, unfortunately. Yes, I replied. Stage 2. I just started treatment. Diana's eyes were kind but assessing. And you're here in Serenity Shores by yourself because my mother-in-law took over my house. My husband didn't notice I was drowning, and I couldn't breathe anymore, I blurted out, surprising myself with the raw honesty. The two women exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. Then Diana declared, You're having lunch with us. It wasn't a question or an invitation so much as a gentle command. Before I could formulate a response, she'd pulled a chair up to their table and Patty was signaling the server. Trust me, Diana said, as if sensing my hesitation. You need friends right now more than you need solitude. And we've been through this before, with Barbara and with Patty's sister. For the second time in 24 hours, strangers had seen what my family had missed, that I needed support, connection, understanding. Not control or criticism or demands, but simple human acknowledgement. I have a doctor's appointment at 2, I said, accepting the chair. We'll have you there on time, promised Patty. Now, tell us everything. And so, over soup and half sandwiches, I told these women about Gloria's invasion, Michael's absence, the diagnosis report sitting unnoticed for days, my breaking point and subsequent escape. I told them about Dr. Chen and the transfer to Dr. Okafor, about my little motel room with its ocean view, about the list I'd made the night before. They listened without interruption, nodding occasionally, sometimes exchanging glances that spoke volumes. When I finished, Diana reached into her expansive handbag and extracted a business card. Serenity Shores Cancer Support Group, she said, handing it to me. Tuesdays at 7 at the community center. It's not just medical support, though we do have nurses and doctors who volunteer. It's for everything else too. The family drama, the existential crises, the anger, the fear, the women who come to this place to escape while they heal. I stared at the card, my vision blurring slightly. There are others? Who come here for treatment to get away from situations? Patty laughed softly. Honey, you're not even close to the first. Something about this town attracts women at crossroads. Cancer, divorce, career changes, empty nests. Serenity Shores has a way of collecting souls in transition. Consider this your official welcome, added Diana. Cancer Club, Serenity Chapter. No membership fees, no obligation, just people who get it. As promised, they had me at Dr. Okafor's office with time to spare. They exchanged phone numbers with me and extracted a promise that I'd come to Tuesday's meeting, then left me with quick hugs and reassurances that I'd found my people. Sitting in Dr. Okafor's waiting room, I turned Diana's card over in my fingers, considering the strange series of events that had brought me here. I'd left home in desperation, fleeing a situation that had become unbearable. Yet somehow, in less than 24 hours in Serenity Shores, I'd found more genuine support and understanding than I'd experienced in months at home. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Your letter broke my heart. Please come home. We can fix this. Mom is leaving tonight. I stared at the message, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Part of me still loved my husband. Part of me missed the comfort of the familiar. But a larger, newly awakened part recognized that going back now would mean slipping into old patterns, old expectations, old invisibility. I put the phone away without responding. Dr. Okafor's receptionist was calling my name. It was time to focus on healing, not just my body, but everything else Gloria and Michael had broken. Dr. Eliza Okafor was nothing like I'd expected. Where Dr. Chen had been methodical and reserved, Dr. Okafor filled the examination room with her vibrant presence. Tall and striking with close-cropped silver hair, colorful glasses, and a voice that managed to be both authoritative and warm. She studied my medical records on her tablet, occasionally nodding or making small noises of consideration. Stage 2B, hormone receptor positive, she said, not as a question but as a confirmation. Dr. Chen's treatment protocol is excellent. I wouldn't change a thing. She looked up, fixing me with an intense gaze. But I do have questions about your support system. I shifted uncomfortably on the examination table. That's complicated at the moment. Cancer makes everything complicated, she replied with a hint of a smile. But treatment outcomes are significantly better for patients with strong support networks. That's not just feel-good nonsense, it's data. She set down her tablet. So, who's in your corner, Rebecca? The question caught me off guard. 2 days ago, I would have automatically listed Michael, my colleagues, perhaps even Gloria in some misguided attempt to maintain the fiction of family harmony. Now, I found myself mentioning the strange collection of people I'd just met. Marge at the motel, Diana and Patty from the cafe, even Katie the server who'd offered me a job. Dr. Okafor listened without interruption, then said something that changed everything. Chosen family can be more healing than biological or legal connections. Trust your instincts about who makes you stronger and who depletes you. Right now, your body needs every ounce of strength for healing. She prescribed a slightly adjusted medication to better manage my nausea, scheduled my next treatment for the following week, and connected me with her office's patient navigator, a former nurse named Valerie who helped coordinate care for out-of-town patients. Valerie will set you up with transportation to and from appointments and can help arrange home health visits if needed, Dr. Okafor explained. And I strongly recommend you attend the Serenity Shores support group. It's more effective than any anti-anxiety medication I could prescribe. As I left her office, I felt something I hadn't experienced since my diagnosis. A sense of being truly seen and supported by my medical team, not just as a collection of cells to be treated, but as a whole person navigating an impossible situation. The afternoon sun was warm on my face as I walked along the harbor, processing all that had happened. Dr. Okafor had given me more than medical care. She'd given me permission to prioritize my own healing over others' expectations, to choose what and who would be part of my recovery. My phone buzzed again. Michael had been texting regularly since my departure, his messages evolving from confused and demanding to increasingly desperate. Please come home. I'm worried about you. I sent Gloria to stay with my sister. The house is quiet now. It's safe to come back. At least tell me where you are. I'll come to you. Rebecca, please. I don't know how to do this without you. That last one cut deepest. I don't know how to do this without you. Not I miss you or I love you or I understand what went wrong. Just the raw admission that without me, his life didn't function properly. I was the essential infrastructure, the operational system, not the partner he couldn't bear to be separated from. I sat on a bench overlooking the fishing boats and finally typed a response. I'm safe. I've transferred my treatment to a doctor. Here, I need time and space to heal, Michael. Please respect that. His reply was immediate. How much time? How much space? I can't just sit here waiting indefinitely. The old Rebecca, the one who had spent decades accommodating everyone else's timelines and comfort levels, would have rushed to reassure him, to provide a precise schedule, to prioritize his anxiety over her own needs. The new Rebecca, the one who had written a list of wants on a bench by the ocean, turned off her phone and slipped it into her pocket. Michael's uncertainty would have to coexist with my healing. It wasn't my responsibility to manage his emotional state anymore. Continued my walk, eventually finding myself at a small art supply store tucked between a bakery and a nautical gift shop. The window display featured easels, canvases, and an array of paints in jewel-like colors. Before I could second-guess myself, I pushed open the door. The interior smelled of linseed oil, turpentine, and possibilities. Shelves lined the walls, filled with every medium imaginable: oils, acrylics, watercolors, pastels, charcoals. A gray-haired man with paint-stained hands looked up from the counter where he was unpacking a shipment. Can I help you find something? He asked. I used to paint, I said, running my fingers along a set of brushes. Years ago. I'm not sure where to start again. He studied me thoughtfully. What did you paint before? Oils? Watercolors? Oils mostly. Landscapes, seascapes. He nodded. Artist returning to the fold. My favorite kind of customer. He came around the counter. Let's start with the basics. You don't need everything right away. Under his guidance, I selected a modest-sized canvas, a basic set of oil paints, brushes, a palette, and a small tabletop easel, perfect for my motel room. The total was more than I would typically spend on myself without agonizing over the decision, but I handed over my credit card without hesitation. There's a painting group that meets at Lighthouse Point on Saturday mornings, he mentioned as he wrapped my purchases. Nothing formal, just local artists setting up to capture the view. Good folks. You'd be welcome to join. I thanked him and left with my supplies, feeling a flutter of excitement I hadn't experienced in years. I couldn't. Remember the last time I'd done something purely for my own enjoyment, with no practical purpose or benefit to anyone else. Back at the Driftwood Inn, I set up my makeshift studio on the small table by the sliding glass doors. The afternoon light streamed in, perfect for painting. I squeezed small dabs of color onto the palette, the familiar scent immediately transporting me back to my college days, before law school applications and wedding planning and mortgage calculations had redirected my life's course. I stood before the blank canvas, brush in hand, suddenly paralyzed. What if I couldn't do it anymore? What if Gloria had been right, and my artistic talents were merely quaint hobby projects not worth pursuing? A wave of nausea interrupted my spiral of self-doubt, a reminder of the medication I'd taken that morning and the battle my body was fighting. I set down the brush and sank onto the bed, closing my eyes against the dizziness. The doctor had warned me that this round of treatment would be particularly tough, and here in my motel room, alone with my canvas and paints, the full weight of my situation finally hit me. I had cancer. I had left my husband. I was alone in a town where I knew no one, trying to reclaim a part of myself that might no longer exist. The enormity of it threatened to overwhelm me. A soft knock at the door pulled me from the edge of despair. I opened it to find Marge holding a covered dish. Brought you some soup, she said simply. My mother's recipe. Good for what ails you. The unexpected kindness broke something loose inside me. Tears welled up, and before I could stop them, they were streaming down my face. Marge set the soup on the kitchenette counter and guided me to sit on the edge of the bed. There, she soothed, patting my shoulder awkwardly but sincerely. First day's always the hardest. Whether it's cancer or leaving a marriage, and you've done both in one go, haven't you? I nodded, unable to speak through the tears. Well, you're not the first and won't be the last. Eat your soup when you can. Rest when you need to. Paint when you're able. She gestured toward my art supplies. And remember, healing isn't linear. Some days you move forward, some days you slide back. All that matters is you're trying. After she left, I managed a few spoonfuls of the soup, a rich, fragrant chicken broth with vegetables and barley, before the fatigue pulled me under. I slept deeply, waking only when the room had darkened with twilight. To my surprise, I felt better, not completely well, but the worst of the nausea had passed. I turned on the lamp beside the bed and looked at the blank canvas still waiting on the table. Something in me had shifted during that deep, healing sleep. The paralyzing need to create something perfect had been replaced by a simple desire to express what I was feeling. I moved to the table, mixed colors on the palette, and began to paint. Not a careful, technically precise landscape as I might have attempted in the past, but an emotional expression of the day's journey, dark waves beneath a storm-streaked sky, with a single beam of light breaking through the clouds. It wasn't technically brilliant, but it was honest. It was mine. I painted late into the night, losing myself in the rhythm of brush against canvas, in the meditative focus of mixing just the right shade, in the satisfaction of seeing my internal landscape take external form. When I finally set down my brush, exhausted but fulfilled, I realized I hadn't thought about Michael or Gloria, or even my cancer for hours. I had just been Rebecca, artist. Not wife, not daughter-in-law, not patient. Just me. I slept dreamlessly and woke to sunlight and the sound of gulls. My phone showed multiple missed calls from Michael, but also a text from Diana. Support group tonight, 7 p.m. I'll pick you up at 6:30. No excuses. The day passed in a gentle rhythm of self-care and small pleasures. I ate when hungry, rested when tired, and returned to my painting when energy allowed. With each hour that passed, the knot of anxiety that had lived between my shoulder blades for months seemed to loosen slightly. I wasn't naive enough to think I'd solved all my problems. The cancer still grew inside me. The marriage still lay in ruins behind me. But for the first time, I wasn't drowning in everyone else's needs. At 6:30 sharp, Diana's blue sedan pulled up outside my room. She greeted me with a warm hug, as if we were old friends rather than recent acquaintances. "Ready for Cancer Club?" she asked cheerfully. "First rule, you can cry if you need to. Second rule, you don't have to talk if you don't want to. Third rule, the cookies are always excellent." The community center was a modest building near the town library, its meeting room arranged with chairs in a circle and, as promised, a table laden with homemade cookies and coffee. About 15 women of various ages were already gathered, chatting comfortably. Diana introduced me around, and I was struck by how normal everyone seemed. Not the grim, illness-ravaged cancer patients of hospital brochures, but vibrant women living their lives alongside their diagnoses. A slender woman with a colorful scarf approached us. "You must be Rebecca," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Olivia, the group facilitator. Diana mentioned you'd be joining us." "I'm not sure what I'm doing here," I admitted. "I only started treatment last week." Olivia smiled, kindly. "None of us knew what we were doing at first. That's why we find each other." She gestured toward the circle. "Come, sit. Listen. Speak if you want to. This is a space for truth, whatever your truth happens to be today." As the meeting began, women shared updates on their treatments, their families, their struggles and victories. There was talk of medications and side effects, but also discussions of boundary setting with well-meaning but exhausting relatives, strategies for communicating needs to partners, and, most surprisingly, laughter. These women found humor in the darkest corners of their experiences, transforming their shared trauma into moments of connection and release. When my turn came, I found myself sharing not just about my diagnosis, but about Gloria's invasion, Michael's absence, and my escape to Serenity Shores. "I left a letter," I concluded. "It probably wasn't the most mature approach, but I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. I couldn't heal there." Heads nodded around the circle. One woman, introduced earlier as Jeanette, leaned forward. "Honey, I lived with my husband and his mother for 30 years. When I got diagnosed, she took over everything. My kitchen, my bedroom, my treatment decisions, said I was too emotional to make good choices." She shook her head. "Leaving was the sanest thing I ever did." Another woman added, "I stayed and regretted it. My husband meant well, but he couldn't separate his fear from my experience. Everything became about how my cancer affected him." Olivia guided the conversation skillfully, never allowing anyone to dictate what I should do, but offering perspectives and experiences that expanded my understanding of my own situation. By the meeting's end, I felt a profound sense of belonging among these women. Not because we shared a disease, but because we shared a determination to live authentically despite it. As Diana drove me back to the motel, she asked, "What did you think?" I considered the question carefully. I think I've spent so long thinking about cancer as something happening to my family that I forgot it's happening to me. Being around those women reminded me that this is my journey, my healing. Diana? Nodded approvingly. That's the whole point of the group, isn't it? To reclaim your story when everyone else is trying to make it about them. She pulled up in front of my room. Same time next week? Definitely, I replied, and meant it. Inside my room, I looked at the painting I'd created. Imperfect, but earnest. Raw, but true. Like me. Like the life I was building step by uncertain step in this unexpected place. I picked up my phone and for the first time since leaving, called my sister Jenna in Seattle. Beck? Her voice was thick with worry. Where are you? Michael's been calling. Us nonstop. I'm safe, I assured her. I'm getting treatment. I'm finding myself, as cliché as that sounds. There was a pause. Then Jenna asked the question no one else had. What do you need from me, Beck? The simplicity of it, her focus on my needs rather than her concerns, brought fresh tears to my eyes. Just this, I whispered. Just someone who asks that question. 3 weeks into my self-imposed exile in Serenity Shores, I stood at Lighthouse, Point with a portable easel, attempting to capture the early morning light as it spilled across the water. Around me, 5 other artists had set up their own stations, each interpreting the same scene through their unique perspectives. The Saturday painting group had welcomed me without question, creating space for me within their circle of creativity and casual friendship. My technique was still rusty, my confidence fragile, but each brushstroke felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been packed away for decades. I'd completed 3 canvases since arriving in town. Imperfect, but honest expressions of my emotional landscape. They now hung on the walls of my motel room, transforming the temporary space into something that felt increasingly like home. That's coming along nicely, commented Eleanor, a retired art teacher with wild gray curls and paint-splattered overalls. She studied my canvas with professional interest. You're capturing the light beautifully. Thank you, I replied, still unused to having my artistic efforts taken seriously. I'm trying to remember everything I learned in school. Technique can be relearned, Eleanor said, adjusting her wide-brimmed hat against the strengthening sun. The important thing is that you're painting from an authentic place. I can see it in your work. There's emotion there, not just technical. Skill. Her words warmed me more than the morning sunlight. During my college years, professors had praised my technical abilities, but often suggested my work lacked emotional depth. Now, after all I'd been through, emotion was the one thing I had in abundance. We painted in companionable silence until the harsher midday light changed the scene too dramatically to continue. As we packed up our supplies, Eleanor invited the group back to her house for coffee. I can't today, I said regretfully. I have an appointment. It wasn't entirely a lie. I'd promised myself I would finally deal with the growing stack of voicemails and text messages from Michael. 3 weeks. Without a real conversation was long enough. Not for his sake, but for mine. I needed clarity to move forward, whatever that might mean. Back in my room, I set my wet canvas carefully on the makeshift drying rack I'd fashioned from a plastic crate, washed the paint from my hands, and finally sat down with my phone. 14. Missed calls, 26 text messages, and 5 voicemails. I skipped the texts for now and went straight to the voicemails, starting with the oldest. Michael's voice filled the room, tight with controlled panic. Rebecca, it's been 3 days. This has gone far enough. You've made your point. Please come. Home so we can discuss this like adults. Delete. Beck, I'm worried sick. No one at your office has heard from you. I've called the hospitals. I'm about to file a missing person report. Please just let me know you're alive. Delete. I found your prescriptions in the medicine cabinet. Are you taking your medication? Are you getting treatment? You can't just abandon your health because you're angry with me. This is serious, Rebecca. Delete. The fourth message was different, quieter, less demanding. I read your letter again. Really read it this time. I didn't realize. I never saw. Please call me Beck. I think I understand now what you were trying to tell me. I paused, finger hovering over the delete button, then moved to the final message, recorded just yesterday. Rebecca. His voice was steady now, resolved. I respect that you need space. I won't keep calling after this. But I need to tell you that I've been meeting with a therapist to understand how we got here. He's helping me see things I never noticed before. If you're ready to talk, I'm here. I love you. I miss you. I'm sorry. I set the phone down, unexpectedly moved by the evolution in his messages. The Michael I knew didn't apologize, didn't seek therapy, didn't acknowledge his blind spots. Had my absence truly catalyzed such change, or was this just another strategy to bring me back into the fold? After a moment's consideration, I composed a text. I'm doing well. Treatment is progressing. I need more time, but I'm ready to talk. Not in person yet. Phone call tomorrow at 3 p.m.? His response was immediate. I'll be waiting. Thank you. With that task completed, I felt lighter, more focused. I had set a boundary, a phone call only, not a return home, and he had respected. It was a small victory, but significant. The next morning, I woke early and restless, knowing my conversation with Michael loomed ahead. Rather than stewing in anxiety, I decided to take Dr. Okafor's advice about physical activity and joined the KEEK Community Center's gentle yoga class, designed specifically for cancer patients and others with health limitations. The instructor, a serene woman named May with a mastectomy scar visible above her tank top, led us through modified poses that accommodated various physical challenges. I noticed women wearing port access bandages, some with no hair, others with compression sleeves for lymphedema. Yet the atmosphere wasn't somber. These women moved with deliberate joy, celebrating what their bodies could do rather than mourning what they couldn't. Listen to your body, May reminded us. Honor its limits today, knowing they might be different tomorrow. This isn't about achieving perfect poses. It's about establishing connection between your mind and your physical self. I closed my eyes, focusing on my breath as it flowed in and out. My body, this betraying, cancer-riddled vessel, was still mine, still capable of movement, sensation, healing. I had spent so long ignoring its signals, subordinating its needs to everyone else's demands. Now I was learning its language again, one gentle stretch at a time. After class, I walked to Lighthouse Beach and sat on the sand, watching gulls dive and soar over the water. The meditation techniques May had taught us helped calm my growing anxiety about the upcoming call. Whatever Michael said, whatever he wanted, I would remain anchored in my truth. At precisely 3, my phone rang. Rebecca? Michael's voice was tentative, as if he feared I might have changed my mind. I'm here, I replied, keeping my tone neutral despite the sudden acceleration of my heart. There was an awkward pause. Then, we both started speaking at once. I wanted to. How are you? We stopped, and I heard him exhale heavily. You first, I offered. How are you? Really? Are you taking care of yourself? The genuine concern in his voice caught me off guard. I'm doing well, actually. The treatment is tough, but my new doctor is excellent. I'm following the protocol exactly. That's good. That's really good. Another pause. Where are you staying? Is it comfortable? Do you need anything? I'm at a motel near the beach. It's simple but perfect for now. I don't need anything. Rebecca, about what happened. His voice faltered. I've been seeing a therapist, Dr. Goldstein. He's helping me understand how badly I failed you. I remained silent, waiting. The letter you left? It was like reading about a stranger's marriage. Except it wasn't a stranger. It was us. It was me. I never realized how much I'd been taking for granted, how I'd left you to handle everything alone. Not alone, I corrected quietly. With your mother criticizing every move I made. He sighed. Yes, about Mom. I've had some difficult conversations with her too. She's not happy with me right now. The thought of Michael standing up to Gloria was so unexpected I almost laughed. What exactly did you say to her? That she had no right to take over our home. That her behavior toward you has been unacceptable for years, and I've been complicit by saying nothing. That if she wants any relationship with me going forward, she needs to respect you and our marriage, if there still is one. The last part hung between us, a question he didn't quite ask directly. Michael, I don't know what our future holds, I said honestly. Right now, I'm focused on healing, not just from cancer, but from years of disappearing inside our marriage. I need to find myself again before I can decide if there's still a place for us together. I understand, he said, though I could hear the disappointment in his voice. Can I ask what you've been doing there, besides treatment? For the first time in our call, I felt a spark of genuine enthusiasm. I'm painting again. I joined a local art group. I've made friends, real friends who see me, not just what I can do for them. Painting? You haven't painted since right after we got married, I finished. Since your mother called my work quaint little hobby projects, and you said nothing. Since our apartment filled up with law books and there was no space for my easel. The bye. Silence that followed was heavy with recognition. I didn't realize, he finally said. I didn't see how much you gave up. That's the problem, Michael. You never saw me at all. Not really, and now I'm learning who I am without you, without your mother, without everyone else's expectations crushing me into their preferred shape. And who is that person? He asked softly. Who are you discovering yourself to be? The question was surprisingly insightful, touching the core of my journey. I'm still figuring that out, but I know she's stronger than I thought, more creative, more worthy of care than I've allowed her to be. She sounds remarkable, Michael said, with genuine admiration. I wish I'd known her better before. So do I. We talked for over an hour. The longest, most honest conversation we'd had in years. Michael told me about his therapy sessions, how he was examining patterns inherited from his parents' marriage. I shared stories about the supportive community I'd found in Serenity Shores. We avoided firm conclusions about our future, focusing instead on understanding how we'd arrived at this breaking point. As we prepared to end the call, Michael hesitated, then said, "There's something else you should know. I'm putting the house on the market." What? Why? Because it's not the right place for us, for you, anymore. It's filled with memories of my mother's intrusions, my neglect, your isolation. If there's any chance for us to start fresh, it can't. Be there. The decisiveness of this move, so uncharacteristic of my usually cautious husband, stunned me. Have you found somewhere else to live? I'm staying in a corporate apartment for now. Taking things one step at a time. Like you. After we hung up, I sat watching the waves, processing our conversation. Something fundamental had shifted between us. For the first time in our marriage, Michael had seen me, really seen me, as a separate person with needs and dreams of my own, not just as an extension of his life. It didn't erase the years of invisibility or guarantee a future together, but it was a beginning. That evening, as I worked on a new painting in my motel room, a knock at the door interrupted my focus. When I opened it, I found Diana standing there with a determined expression and a bottle of wine. "Emergency meeting," she announced, brushing past me into the room. "Patty's meeting us at the Sandpiper in 20 minutes. "What's wrong?" I asked, alarmed. Diana pointed to my phone, which was lighting up with an incoming call from Gloria. That's the third time she's called in the last hour. I saw it when you were in the bathroom at yoga class this morning. You never mentioned. Your mother-in-law had tracked you down. I stared at the phone in disbelief. She hasn't. I never told Michael where I was staying. He doesn't even know I'm in Serenity Shores. Well, somehow Hurricane Gloria has found you, and according to Patty's cousin who works at the Grand Harbor Resort, she checked in there this afternoon. Diana folded her arms. So we're having a strategy session right now. 30 minutes later, I sat in a corner booth at the Sandpiper with Diana and Patty, a glass of ginger ale in front of me, alcohol being contraindicated with my current medications. The cozy seafood restaurant was busy with Saturday night diners, providing enough ambient noise to ensure our conversation remained private. How did she find me? I wondered aloud, still shocked by this development. Patty shrugged. Small towns? Honey, someone probably recognized you from a photo and mentioned it to someone who mentioned it to someone else. Or she hired a private investigator. Rich people do that, you know. The how doesn't matter, Diana said firmly. What matters is what you're going to do when she inevitably shows up at your door tomorrow morning with her designer luggage and list of grievances. I hadn't allowed myself to imagine this scenario. Gloria invading my sanctuary, undermining the progress I'd made, attempting to pull me back into the family orbit through guilt or manipulation. The thought made me physically ill. I can't face her, I admitted. Not here. Not now. This place is mine, the first thing that's been truly mine in decades. I can't let her taint it. Patty reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Then, don't. What do you mean? You don't have to open the door. You don't have to answer her calls. You don't have to give her a single minute of your time or energy. Diana nodded in agreement. Boundaries, Rebecca. They're not just lines in the sand. They're fortress walls protecting what's most valuable. Your healing. But she's here. In town. She'll make a scene. She'll do what she's always done. Diana interrupted gently. Try to control the situation. Center herself in your story. Make your cancer and your marriage about her feelings. The question is, will you let her? I thought about the past 3 weeks. The peace I'd found. The parts of myself I'd reclaimed. The clarity that had come with distance. I thought about my conversation with Michael. How we'd begun to see each other more truthfully without Gloria's interference. I thought about my body, fighting each day to heal itself from cancer, while my spirit healed from years of diminishment. No, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. I won't let her. Patty grinned. There she is, the Rebecca we've been getting to know, the one who knows her own worth. So what's the plan? Diana asked, practical as always. I considered my options, then felt a slow smile spread across my face. I think it's time I wrote another letter. The letter to Gloria sat in an envelope, on the front desk of the Grand Harbor Resort, delivered by Marge's nephew who worked as a bellhop there. I hadn't slept well, but morning found me surprisingly calm as I set up my easel at Lighthouse Point. Today wasn't a group painting day, but I needed the therapeutic focus of creativity to center myself for whatever would unfold. The tide was coming in, waves crashing against the rocks below the lighthouse with increasing force. I mixed blues and whites on my palette, trying to capture the energy of the water, the resilience of the stone, the constancy of the lighthouse standing firm against decades of storms. It felt like a metaphor for something I was only beginning to understand about my own strength. It's really quite good. The voice behind me sent a jolt through my body, not Gloria's. I'd braced myself for her inevitable appearance, but Michael's. I turned slowly, brush still in hand, to find my husband standing a respectful distance away. He looked different somehow. Thinner, with several days of stubble on his usually clean-shaven face, dressed in casual clothes rather than his customary suit. "What are you doing here?" I asked, too surprised to hide my confusion. "Mom called last night. he explained. Said she'd tracked you down and was going to sort things out and bring you home. I knew that would be a disaster, so I drove through the night to intercept her. I set down my brush, wiping my hands on a paint-stained cloth. How did she find me? She hired someone, former client of Dad's who works as a private investigator now. He shook his head in disgust. I'm so sorry, Rebecca. I never told her where you were. I respected your privacy, your need for space. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. I believe you, I said, and realized I truly did. Michael gestured at my canvas. You're really painting again. It's beautiful. Thank you. I studied him, noting the dark circles under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. You look exhausted. I haven't been sleeping well. He smiled ruefully. Turns out I don't know how to function without you. But not in the way I thought. It's not the cooking or the laundry or the schedule management I miss, though God knows I'm terrible at all of that. It's your presence, your perspective, your laugh. I felt a twinge of something complex, affection mingled with caution. Michael, I'm not here to pressure you, he interrupted quickly. I'm here to run interference with Mom. She got your letter this morning. My stomach tightened. And she's livid, checking out of her hotel as we speak, I believe. There was a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Whatever you wrote, it worked. I had spent hours crafting that second letter, making it both compassionate and unyielding. I'd acknowledged Gloria's concern for her son, her desire to help during a difficult time, even her good intentions. But I'd also set crystal clear boundaries. I would not be returning to our old patterns. I would not tolerate her criticism or control. My cancer journey was mine to navigate, with support from those who respected my autonomy. She could choose to be one of those people, or she could remove herself from my healing process entirely. You look different, Michael said, studying me with curious eyes. It's not just the hair or the clothes. There's something, I don't know. You seem more present. I am more present, I replied. For the first time in years, I'm fully inhabiting my own life, not just managing everyone else's. A comfortable silence fell between us as I turned back to my painting, adding touches of light where the sun hit the waves. Michael watched quietly, seemingly content just to be near me without making demands. The house sold, he said eventually. All cash offer, 20% above asking. We close in 3 weeks. I paused, brush midair. That was fast. Market's hot right now. He hesitated. I've been looking at places here, in Serenity Shores. This caught me completely off guard. Here? Why? Because you're here, he said simply. Because this place has given you something I never could. Because if there's any chance for us to build something new, something better, it won't happen back there. I set down my brush, trying to process what he was saying. Michael, I haven't decided if... I know, he assured me. I'm not assuming anything. But I do know I want to be where you are, even if it's not in the same house, even if we're not together in the way we were before. I want the chance to know the Rebecca you're becoming. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Diana's ringtone. I answered immediately. Hurricane Gloria is on the move, she reported without preamble. Just stormed out of the Grand Harbor with her luggage, got into a taxi. Want me to run interference? No need, I replied, looking at Michael. I've got backup. I ended the call to find Michael watching me with a bemused expression. New friends? The best kind. People who see me clearly and support me unconditionally. He nodded, a flash of understanding, and perhaps envy, crossing his face. I'm glad you're not alone. 20 minutes later, Gloria's taxi pulled up at Lighthouse Point. She emerged in her trademark tailored pantsuit, pearls gleaming at her throat, looking wildly out of place among the casual beachgoers and tourists. There you are, she exclaimed, striding toward us with determination. Rebecca, I've never been so insulted in my life. That letter was completely uncalled for. After everything I've done for you. Mom. Michael stepped forward, placing himself between us. Stop. Gloria halted, her expression sliding from indignation to confusion. Michael, what are you doing here? Making sure you don't undo all the progress Rebecca and I have made. His voice was firm but not unkind. You got her letter. She made her position clear. Now you have a choice to make. Gloria's gaze darted between us, calculating. I don't understand what's happening here. First, Rebecca abandons her home and responsibilities. Then you sell the house without consulting me, and now you're both hiding. Out in this tourist trap? This isn't how our family handles difficulties. That's just it, Mom, Michael said quietly. It's not your family to handle anymore. It's mine and Rebecca's, if she'll still have me. And we're doing things differently. Now, I stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Michael. Gloria, I appreciate your concern. But as I wrote in my letter, my cancer journey is mine to navigate. My marriage is between Michael and me. Your role going forward depends entirely on your ability to respect our boundaries. Boundaries? She scoffed. Such a trendy concept. In my day, families worked through difficulties together, not by running away and writing accusatory letters. In your day, I replied calmly, women like me disappeared inside their marriages, sacrificing their identities to meet everyone else's needs. That's not the example I want to set, for myself or for any future grandchildren we might have. Gloria's eyes widened at the mention of grandchildren, a subject of considerable interest to her over the years. You're being extremely dramatic, Rebecca. All I ever did was try to help. I know that's what you believe, I acknowledged. But help that doesn't respect the recipient's needs isn't really help at all. Michael's hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with my paint-stained ones. The gesture wasn't possessive but supportive, a physical manifestation of the new alliance forming between us. Gloria noticed, her expression softening slightly. Are you two reconciling? We're talking, Michael answered. We're listening to each other. We're building something new that doesn't include criticizing Rebecca's housekeeping or rearranging her kitchen without permission. For the first time in our long acquaintance, I saw uncertainty flicker across Gloria's face. She'd always been so assured of her position, so confident in her authority. Now the ground beneath her was shifting, and she didn't know how to regain her footing. I see, she said finally. Well, if that's how you both feel, I suppose I should go back to the city. I have my bridge club on Thursdays anyway. Safe travels, Mom, Michael said kindly but firmly. I'll call you next week. After she'd gone, we stood in silence watching the waves. Well, I said finally, that was anticlimactic. Michael laughed, the tension breaking. With Mom, anticlimactic is a victory. I returned to my painting, and Michael sat nearby on a bench, content simply to watch. The familiar rhythm of brush against canvas soothed my rattled nerves. After a while, I sensed rather than saw Diana and Patty observing from a discreet distance, keeping watch like protective sisters. Your friends? Michael asked, nodding in their direction. Part of my support system, I confirmed. The kind of women who drive across town to help you strategize when your mother-in-law invades your sanctuary. He smiled ruefully. I like them. Already. As the afternoon light began to fade, I packed up my supplies, the painting nearly complete. Michael helped carry my easel, respecting my independence, but offering assistance where it made sense. A new balance we were just beginning to find. There's a dinner at the community center tonight, I told him as we walked back toward town. For the cancer support group. Would you like to come? Meet my new community? The invitation surprised us both. 3 weeks ago, I couldn't imagine. wanting Michael in this sacred space I'd carved out for myself. Now, something had shifted. Not a return to our old patterns, but the tentative emergence of something new. "I'd be honored," he said simply. That evening, surrounded by the women who had held space for my transformation, with Michael listening intently beside me, I shared the story of my journey, from invisible caretaker to a woman reclaiming her voice, her art, her very self. The letter I left changed everything, I concluded. Not because it brought my husband back or solved all our problems, but because it was the first time in decades I'd told my complete truth, regardless of the consequences. The women nodded in recognition, some wiping away tears, others reaching for their partner's hands. Michael's eyes shone with emotion as he listened, truly listened, perhaps for the first time. Later, walking back to my motel under a sky brilliant with stars, Michael asked, "What happens now, Rebecca?" I considered the question, all its implications and possibilities. "Now," I said, "we write a new story, together but not entangled, connected but not dependent, equal authors of whatever comes next." He smiled, understanding. "I'd like that." Above us, the lighthouse beam swept across the darkness, constant and true, illuminating the way forward, one revolution at a time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.